What is propaganda? Definitions vary, but propaganda is basically communication which deliberately attempts to influence the opinions or actions of others. Propaganda is usually distinguished from advertising, which serves a similar purpose by its official nature, and by the fact that it has a political or social rather than economic goal. Propaganda is for many a pejorative term. During the Second World War, the United States established the Office of War Information, and the United Kingdom had its Ministry of Information, in pointed contrast to the Nazi Ministry for Popular Enlightenment and Propaganda, founded in 1933 under the directorship of Joseph Goebbels. Axis propaganda was usually characterized as evil lies and deceptions, in keeping with the sinister depiction of the Nazi regime in Germany and the militarist government of Japan. Propaganda is most often, though not exclusively, associated with wartime. The First and Second World Wars are often considered the golden age of propaganda, with World War II being a particularly fertile period for a number of reasons. First, World War II was a longer and more global conflict than its predecessor. It resulted in a total war environment in many nations, with virtually every aspect of daily life affected in some way by the conflict, even if hostilities did not directly threaten one's homeland. Furthermore, media which existed not at all or in rudimentary form in the 1914-1918 period were utilized to great effect for propaganda during the later conflict. These new media included motion pictures, radio, and comic books. It was almost literally impossible to read a newspaper or magazine, to go to the movies, to listen to the radio, to walk down a street in a city or town without being reminded of the war in some way. What effect did this near-total immersion in the war experience have on the public? What were the goals of wartime propaganda and how were they achieved? As mentioned before, propaganda strives to affect opinions and attitudes as well as behavior. Consumers of the media were urged to act in a certain manner, to conserve fuel, to buy war bonds, to behave responsibly at work and home, and to believe in certain things, that the war was being fought for democracy, that the enemy threatened our core values, our families, even our way of life. This series of videos shall examine the covers of wartime American comic books and deconstruct their propaganda content, comparing and contrasting them with films, posters, and other media, analyzing the symbols, images, and design to determine the messages being conveyed, openly and covertly, to comic book readers of the period. This study focuses solely on comic book covers and does not address the contents of the comic magazines themselves. Comic book covers are like movie posters, enticing potential customers with a single exciting image. Some are crude, some are works of art. Some are simple, some are complex. Some relate directly to the stories inside, others are only symbolic. But each cover contains a message. Why comic books? Comic books were a relatively new phenomenon when World War II began. Reprints of newspaper comic strips began appearing in magazine form in the early 1930s, and original comic books soon followed. The most famous comic characters were superheroes like Superman, Batman, Captain Marvel, and Captain America, but dozens of companies published hundreds of titles and thousands of issues every year. By early 1942, 15 million comic books were sold each month, and every issue claimed up to 5 different readers. In December 1943, 125 different titles were available monthly, selling a total of 25 million copies. Superman and Captain Marvel comics often sold more than 1 million copies each month. In 1940, the average per-issue circulation of DC Comics was 800,000 per title, but even lesser titles from smaller publishers would average 200 to 400,000 sales per issue. Who read comic books during the Second World War? Children, of course, from the very young to teenagers. However, adults also enjoyed comic books. The United States Army was the largest single customer, purchasing thousands of copies each month for service personnel. Simple entertainment, to be sure, but as we shall see, capable of delivering a propaganda message to the reader.